strong Hawaiian this day, for as I speak is the good Lord breathing life into his newest servant, a little girl, mine. For many years, I have watched and waited for this moment, and for many years has it eluded me. I must be honest with you. I am quite as surprised as you are at this turn of events. I am 69 years old. But is an old man less capable of loving a child than a young man? I think not. For I have accumulated much wisdom and aloha to draw upon and share. I was Kahuali'i, guardian of the chiefs. And for many years it was my kuleana to care for their royal children. For many years I watched over 16 scholars from the Kula the chief's children's school, shed their youth, and they grew into the great Kani and Wahine to lead this kingdom into the next century. I was their teacher, their steward, and their protector. And from them, I learned a great many lessons. At least my daughter will not share the burdens of my childhood. You see, I became a man when the cup was the law of the land. A land where the good Lord had not yet shined his light. So a child's safety was not guaranteed. I learned this in a very sad way when, as a boy, my brother, Mahuloha, was strangled to death by violating the kapu. Now at 10 years old, I began my service to the ali'i. I was tasked with carrying and tending the possessions of the future mo'i, the sacred son of Kamehameha I, Lihulihu. It was during Lihulihu's reign that the missionaries brought the word of the Lord to our shores. And it was during Lihulihu's reign, under his command, that I began my first Western schooling. Now, Lihulihu left this life in 1824, but I retained a friendship with his widow, Kinau, who had soon become Kuhinanui after the death of Ka'ahumanu. Before Queen Ka'ahumanu passed, she asked me to aid her in raising Lihulihu's brother, the boy Mu'i, Kaui Kia'uli. So it began. I embraced the role of teacher for the first amongst many children in my lifetime. I tried to advise the young Mu'i to be a strong, honest, and Christian ruler. But Kaui Kia'uli became unruly after Ka'ahumanu's death, and he could not heed the words of his elders. You see, Kaui Kia'uli was raised in a world that was governed ways of the Hawaiian. And now he was told those ways were wrong. So I understood his struggle. So I sat down with the boy and we would have conversations, but he would not listen to me. He would not listen to his family, nor his advisors. So, like others, I left his service. This boy, who became like a son to me, but he was not my son, for I had no living children. In my youth, I was foolish. I did not heed the word of the Lord. The Lord did give my wife Sarah and I a child, but soon took it away to heaven. Now, after Lihulihu's death, Kinau married Keku Anaoa, the governor of Oahu, and had several children. They were called Moses, Alexander, and Lot. Now, with her family secured, Kinau still felt this pain in her heart. Now, she was of an age where bearing more children would be difficult, and I understood her pain. One day, I took her hand in mine, and I humbly and graciously spoke to her and said, if you should conceive another child, I would be honored to be the uha, the foster parent. Now, friends, this was not a request to be made lightly, but Kinau felt much aloha for me and I for her, and she agreed. So when she was blessed with the child, November 1838, she sent for me at once. The child, she told me, was to be called Victoria Kamamalu, who would become the future Kuhina Nui. As our agreement, Kinau would mother the child, and it was my lap that she would sit on and my arms that would hold her and soothe her. So Sarah and I moved into the Honolulu fort with the governor, where Kamamalu was raised with her brothers. Now, something awful happened in 1839. Honolulu was struck with an epidemic of mumps. I quickly returned to good health, but Kinau did not. And it was not long before she began her journey to the next life. It was her final wish that Kamamalu and the royal children be given a fine Western education. She believed that by remaining together, harmony could develop amongst them, thereby uniting them in the face of Western powers. So, a consultation was held how best to create a school for these children. A letter was delivered to two of the newest missionaries, Mr. Amos Starr Cook and his wife Juliet. It read, "We ask Mr. Cook to be the teacher for our royal children." It was signed by the High Chiefs of Oahu and Kamehameha III. Mr. Cook accepted their request, and oh, my friends, the foundation was laid for the Kula Ali'i, the Chiefs Children's School. June 1839, Moses, Lot, Alexander, William Lihulihu, Bernice, James Kaliokalani paid their first visit to Mr. Cook's study. They were given school twice per day, then sent home on the shoulders of their kahu in the Hawaiian way. Now, it was decided that a kahu be selected to look after the royal children. And to my surprise, I was given this great honor. But I had my doubts. I did not know what to make of it. One evening, I dined with Kawi Keaohuli, and he seemed like a different fella entirely. He had elected to put away his rambunctious youth. He spoke with such a seriousness that I had never seen in him before. He looked at me and said, "You go to the school with your child, Kamamalu, and you take with you my adopted keiki. If you do not go, neither will my keiki." Well, suddenly, my doubt was like the wind passing by. In the latter months of 1839, it was time for the children to come and stay at the schoolhouse. At first, the children were sick with loneliness for their families. Each night, most all of them had a hearty crying spell. But in time, the crying subsided. But the children were, the children had strong inclinations to run off to their kahu, who were lurking about outside the gate. These kahu thought the kula ali'i threatened their position, so they did whatever they could to weaken our influence over the children. Young Alexander especially was under his kahu spell. One day, he tried to escape the fence 3 times. When it was time for bed, he would not go, and he bit my wrist in protest. Indeed, the first month of the school, some of the children, they engaged in defiant acts. I once saw Moses and Alexander misbehave, and in the face of consequences, Moses stood up to Mr. Cook and said, "I am a child of the chief. To which Mr. Cook replied, "Yes, but I am the king of the school." Well, it was clear that some of the children had never suffered to follow many rules. So Mr. Cook attempted to impress upon them Christian rules such as truth-telling, cleanliness, and the confession of one's sin. Now, between you and I have often heard that Mr. Cook was cruel to the children. I can only say that I did not agree with the physical chastisement that was common among the foreigners. But soon, other disciplines were employed, such as sending them alone to their rooms. Let me share with you a particular day. Mr. Judd, Dr. Judd, came to visit the school, and he spoke to Mr. Cook and said, "I think your punishments are too severe." Well, Mr. Cook was sick with guilt. He could not eat his supper that night, and I watched him on the side as he stayed up all evening. He could not sleep. Despite these trials, Providence did shine on our little Ohana. After establishing their moral and religious character, the Mo'i wished for the children to be given knowledge of the English language. Mr. and Mrs. Cook conducted this so well that some of the young ones spoke English better than their native Hawaiian. They learned how to read, write. They were given teachings in the higher branches of knowledge, chemistry, geometry, and general history. Eventually, the scholars increased from 6 to 16, with Howley day scholars and the ever-growing Cook family taken into consideration as well. Sleep was hardly heard of, as Sarah and I were inclined to be parent, playmate, teacher, judge, chastising at one time, comforting the next, feeding them when they were hungry and giving them medicine when they were sick. Well, let me say one thing. Sickness was hardly seen at the Kulaʻali'i. Yes. The health of the scholars were preserved by active exercise, swimming, daily walks, riding, playing ball. It was on my blind mount that the children learned horsemanship. Though my Leo was blind, she could still feel the fear in her rider. Eventually, the children learned to trust the horse, and she them. All the boys became fine horsemen, and some of the girls showed great skill, especially Emma, who was gifted with the nickname Wahine Hololio, the woman who runs the horse. Now, their leisure time was spent studying music, and I never heard such beautiful voices. And some of them were fine performers on the pianoforte, the accordion, the flute. Oh, yes. They were very active. We kept them very active. And I must say, I had never seen a group of boys and girls, especially such a large group, that had few difficulties among themselves. If only the life at Kulaʻali'i were so simple. Well, it was not. For in those years, the beautiful ehua flower of our islands was in full bloom. But the meddlesome foreigners thought to pick it for themselves. Now the young ali'i soon learned about this trouble for themselves when the British vessel, the Carrisford, sailed into Honolulu. Its captain, Lord Paulette, convinced the Mo'i under threat of violence that the kingdom of Hawaii should be turned over to the British. So February 25th, 1843, the Hawaiian flag was hauled down, and the British flag was hoisted up in its place. Some of the young ali'i cried. They felt their glory had departed. I could not bear to see their little hearts broken so. And well, there was a fishbone in my throat. Well, our salvation came in July 28th, 1843, when Rear Admiral Thomas arrived and quickly undid the mischief of his underling. Reverend Thomas met with the mo'i, and together they formed an agreement, and the Hawaiian kingdom was restored. We had escaped a disaster. Now, the following week, I saw the largest celebration I have ever known. Guns blasted, men cheered, and the young ali'i marched through the streets, singing in those beautiful voices, waving the Hawaiian flag. Yes, indeed, we had escaped a disaster. But tensions remained high with the Hawaiian kingdom and the problematic foreigners. The mo'i called me away from the school for weeks at a time to advise him. And for my loyalty, I was rewarded with prestigious appointments: the Privy Council, the House of Nobles, the House of Representatives. But I was away from my school. And when I would return, I could barely recognize some of my young charges. The children had grown, and our ohana at the kula ali'i began to break apart. Moses, having grown bold and rebellious, was a bad influence on the other boys. He would sneak them out at night and behind the school wall encourage them to drink liquor. Well, because of his misdeeds and the will of the Privy Council, oh, Moses, he was expelled from the school. Alexander and Lot left to begin apprenticeships in business, and Bernice Hawaii, having grown into a young, beautiful woman, was married to a Hawaii businessman, Charles Reed Bishop. Even Mr. and Mrs. Cook, having grown weary over the years, retired from teaching. So it was that some of our royal scholars went on to do great things. In my lifetime, I have seen kings made out of Alexander first and then Lot. And I suppose a few more will rise to the title one day. Alexander married his schoolmate Emma Rook, and together they founded the Queen's Medical Hospital, and my kamamalu became Kuhina Nui. I miss her every day. She died 10 in the morning, May 29th, 1866. And I have not bothered myself to rear any children since. Until now. Let me share a last memory with you. When Kamumama was small, she and I went horseback riding. Her horse was slow in progress, so she asked for a branch to use as a switch. And when she whipped the flank of the animal, it balked and she fell off. I leaped off my horse, went to her and kissed her on the cheek and said, "Are you hurt?" And she said to me, "No." And without any anxiety or fear in her eyes, she said, "Put me back on the horse." I did, and we rode on. Oh, companions, to be a makua, to be a parent, is no easy task. If only our children would know that all we ask is what is best for them, that discipline is rooted in love. The children at the Kula Ali'i took this to heart. Some of them became fine Christian Hawaiians. Some did not. Others would not live long enough to know. All we can do as parents is to try our best. And when we fall from our horse, we must ask with grace to be lifted back onto it. My new little girl, my Irene, will be my pride and joy, my constant companion. And when she is cold, I will give her warmth. I will lose sleep in my eyes when she cries or when she tosses about. And when she walks with her own feet, she will seek knowledge and wisdom like Kamamalu and all her royal siblings. I must go back to my wife and my daughter, Irene. Mahalo kia kua. Good night. Aloha.